There is arguably no better feeling in fantasy football than when you land an absolute steal. You get my 2025 Fantasy Football Draft Dominator, which is jam-packed with strategy and analysis for 250-plus players. And he's been strong in fantasy football. He's averaging over 18 fantasy points per game over 25 career games where he's played at least 73% of the offensive snap. 2025 week winner, formerly known as the heat map. So you can conquer start-sit dilemmas, find plug-and-play streamers, and dominate your weekly matchups with this one-of-a-kind resource, Discord community, where you can get personalized advice from 180-plus and counting sharp fantasy football minds that are helping each other dominate. 365 days of elite fantasy football analysis, resources, and Discord community. What is up, my friend? Good morning, everybody. Welcome into episode 65.
65.
I should probably keep a list of this somewhere.
We're far away from it being a nice episode. So
that we got to do something special for the very nice episode. But welcome in. Welcome in, everybody. Episode 65, bright and early, 8 a.m. Central, 6 a.m. out in California, which I know that's where Jordan is located. I appreciate you guys getting up early to hang out with us. We are going to spend the next 90 minutes or so diving into your start-sit questions, talking Week 3 fantasy football. I'm Mikey Henninger. Am I pointing the right? There we go. That is Tanner Dawson, who is the wonderful magician that's behind the scenes most of the time when it comes to the Inside the 20 Basement Brewed Fantasy Football show. Tanner, how you doing today, dude?
Yeah, I'm good. I got to go to the KU game last night and watch us rock West Virginia, which is kind of what I was hoping for. Now, hopefully tonight I can watch the Chiefs rock the Giants. So let's hope it translates, in a way.
The 0-2 Chiefs. When's the last time we saw that?
Hey, at the news yesterday that broke that Xavier Worthy's out again.
Yeah.
Concerns me. So
yeah, for sure, man.
It's been a while.
They should take care of business against the Giants. But dude, if Russ stays hot.
Yeah, 450 yards last week. You gotta be telling me, like our secondary, it's not, top guys by any means. So
yeah.
But yeah, I don't know, man. Well, I don't know.
We'll see what happens, man. It should be a good one for fantasy football purposes, if nothing else. By the way, everybody, if you're joining this show for the first time, first of all, welcome. Really appreciate you being here. Tanner and I are on an absolute mission to get to 1,000 subscribers on YouTube. We currently we're just about to hit 900. So if you like what you see in today's show, it costs you nothing to
hit the subscribe button as Mikey freezes here. But it's all right. He'll be right back here as the internet's adapting. But yeah, we are on a mission and we're dropping generally. There you're back. You're back, Mikey. Okay.
Did I just talking to nobody that whole time? I just left or what?
I just kind of froze. So
fun stuff. I might have to pause and send a text message to my family. Get off the internet. I don't know if you're sucking up all the juice there, but anyways,
I like it.
Anyways, yeah, hit that subscribe button, everybody. If you're new to the show, just a quick caveat. If you're expecting this to be a quick hitting start-sit show where I just rattle off a name and move on to the next question, you're going to want to tune out and go to the next one because that is not how this works. I'm a very big believer. I'm a subscriber in giving you as much data and facts and statistics and evidence as I possibly can to help you with these start-sit questions. But that means we got to go through a process. We got to go through my start-sit process of deciding player X or player Y. I promise you it'll be worth the time, but it's not going to be a quick hitter. Okay. Other than that, I feel like I'm forgetting one thing, but I think we could probably just hop into it. Tanner, you got anything?
I don't. I'd say let's get into it here. We're in week 3 here. It's we got some established data. I think after a couple of weeks, got some ideas through some game scripts here. So it should be a good week to really evaluate here to see what's going on. So let's pop into it. Let's get our guy that's a Discord guy currently. Jordan has his first question all the way there, back there in Cali. He wants to know, he needs one for his flex. Marvin Harrison, Hollywood, or DeAndre Swift. And just take note, Mikey, as of last I looked, Jalen Royals is supposed to be playing. So for the Chiefs.
Yep, Jalen Royals is in. Well, he's supposed to be in. Yep, yes. Xavier Worthy's out. Jordan, good morning, man. I know you're out in California. Really appreciate you getting up this early, even though you're a proponent of cold coffee over hot coffee. I'm fine with a good iced coffee, but there's no way that that's the preference over hot coffee. But yeah, man, this is a good question to start the day. Now it's wild, man. We all had high hopes for Marvin Harrison, but he's doing fine, but he's just not taking the league by storm like we expected. I'll tell you right now, my answer to this question is going to be DeAndre Swift. So maybe we can do a couple quick hitters so that we can kind of keep everything rolling. Here's what I'm thinking. I want as much exposure to that Chicago Bears Dallas Cowboy game as I can possibly get. And that includes their wide receivers. That includes both running backs, Javonte Williams, DeAndre Swift. I got DeAndre Swift starting in a lot of leagues. Hollywood Brown is somebody that I was high on going into week 2 after he had, 15, 16 targets in week 1. That's usually a really, really good sign. No Xavier Worthy. Now, he only had 5 targets last week. He also got dinged up, if I'm not mistaken, Tanner. I think he got knocked out of the game for a couple snaps. Yeah. That could have played its part in it. And I do expect Hollywood Brown to bounce back here, but the fact of the matter is the Chiefs are 6, I think, point favorites. If that game goes according to script, goes according to plan, the Chiefs theoretically shouldn't have to do as much in the air as they've been asked to do over the last 2 weeks. We don't need this massive volume game out of Hollywood Brown if we're going to win, if you're the Chiefs. And then Marvin Harrison, man, we're getting 6 targets, 7 targets per game. You're banking on touchdowns with Marvin. The Cardinals have a low implied point total, 20, 21 points. They're really not expected to put that many points on the board. So if he doesn't find the end zone, some of these guys you can bank on catches and yards. And Marvin Harrison just hasn't been that guy. It's been very touchdown or bust the way that the Arizona Cardinals use him. So I think DeAndre Swift is 100% DeAndre Swift is going to give you the safest floor out of this bunch, but his ceiling is also really nice as well. That Cowboys Bears game has an over under of 49.5 as of about a half hour ago. It has the Bears. It should be a close game. It's a 1.5 point spread. The Bears have a projected point total of 24 points. Dallas has given up the 12th most PPR points per game to opposing running backs. There's just a lot to like here about pretty much everybody on the Bears, pretty much everybody on the Cowboys. And I hate to say that as a Packers fan, because I'm not particularly fond of either team, but from a fantasy football standpoint, it looks pretty good. What we're looking at right here, right now, guys, this is called, if you're new to the show, this is called the week winner. Okay. This is something that I put together every single week for members of the Basement Brewed Fantasy Football family. It's contextual matchup analysis for literally every single player in every single game, every single week. So I'm doing 30 plus hours of research and sharing with you what I find in the week winner. Okay. So for DeAndre Swift, we're treating him like a solid floor RB2 with RB1 upside in a likely shootout. And he's currently handling about 80% of Chicago's backfield touches. He has 15 plus touches in both games, so that's where that safe floor comes from. I'm expecting 13 to 17 PPR points with upside to 20 plus if he stays active as a receiver and converts a touchdown. He is handling 80% of the Bears' backfield touches, locked in RB2 with RB1 upside. And the matchup against the Cowboys, first of all, they gave up 18 plus points to Saquon Barkley. That, in some ways, you could actually call that a good game for the Cowboys, that they held Saquon Barkley to just 18 points. But then last week, we saw Cam Scatterbo have a nice day against Dallas. Last year's Cowboys, by the way, they were mediocre against running backs, holding them to the 10th fewest catches. But other than that, they allowed the 16th most rushing yards, 8th most rushing touchdowns, 6th most receiving yards, 16th most receiving touchdowns, and ultimately the 13th most PPR points per game. The point is, it's not a matchup to fear. It's not a matchup to be scared of for DeAndre Swift. So he's going to bring a much, much safer floor than both Hollywood Brown and Marvin Harrison. And I would argue that the ceiling this week is pretty similar to what those guys can bring you. Now,
obviously a guy, a talent like Marvin Harrison, that dude could get you 2-3 touchdowns any game. Hollywood Brown could rack up 10 catches. But if you try and combine the floor with the ceiling, DeAndre Swift is the answer on that one.
I like it. I like it here. We'll get to your question in just a minute here. Hey, appreciate it, Jordan. Appreciate that. I did. Greg Kirkson here. Greg, appreciate you joining. He goes, I don't have a question, but I love the graphic with all the backup QBs playing this weekend. On the thumbnail of today's episode, it is legit Mikey with a bunch of backups.
Yeah,
with some plays behind it. So it's awesome.
That feels like the story of my life, Mikey with a bunch of backups. Like I'm right where I belong in that thumbnail, just with all the backups. That sounds about right. But what I did like about that thumbnail, Tanner, I have to give you credit. I don't know if you planned this, but on the thumbnail you wrote streaming, which makes sense because we're streaming right now. But then you think about the quarterbacks and Tyrod Taylor's a streamer. I'm like, I don't know if that was intentional, but I like it.
That's fair. That's fair. Yeah, I'm sure we'll get some questions on some backup quarterbacks today, so we can dig into it here. In
fact, it looks like we just got one from Kobe Obi, and I don't want to skip any of the comments above that, but if we hop over to Kobe, I can kind of kill the streamers tab. I can answer this one really quick. Kobe, good question here. Any deep sleeper quarterback to start? I lost Burrow. Yeah, sorry to hear that, man. So unfortunately, waiting for a trade, but right now my choices are Trevor Lawrence, not bad, and Penix as my top. But Russell Wilson, Geno Smith, and Sam Darnold off waivers. So I'm going to give you one that feels nasty, okay? It does not feel – it's not sexy. It's gross. But let me pop over here. On the week winner, I have a streamers and stashes tab. So if you're in a pinch, you need to scoop up a defense, I got you. If you're in a pinch and need to scoop up a kicker, I got you. I've actually been working on a kicker research project over the last 12 plus months, and we've identified some trends to help identify kickers that are going to score double-digit points in their upcoming game. I'll just give you a hint right now. This week's targets are Jake Elliott and Will Reichard. I have no idea if that's how you pronounce Will Reichard's name for the Vikings. Will Richard, I'm not sure. But these are the two that we're targeting, Jake Elliott and Will Reichard. But if you want access to that, you can get it any time. In a pinch and need a tight end, I got you. If you want to stash some running backs, stash some wide receivers, this is the ultimate key to unlocking upside in fantasy football, winning the race to the waiver wire before that race even begins. But we're talking quarterback streamers right now, right? I already told you I want as much exposure to the Bears-Lions game or Bears-Cowboys game as I can possibly get. There are some leagues where Caleb Williams is available on the waiver wire, and he's easily the top quote-unquote streaming option if he's available. Jared Goff, Daniel Jones, Jordan Love. But here is where I told you it's going to feel gross. It's not going to feel sexy, but check this out. Tyrod Taylor, bottom line, he's a viable streamer, QB2. Historically, he gets you 17 plus fantasy points per game with real rushing upside, right? So that's where there's a little bit of that fantasy football cheat code. If you can just plug somebody in who's going to get you rushing yards, Tyrod Taylor's a pretty good bet for that. Tampa Bay, they've been quarterback friendly. Penix got 24 against them. CJ Stroud got 15 plus. The Bucs were top 3 easiest matchup for quarterbacks last year. Now, New York's ugly setup, right? There's not anything that's pretty about the Jets offense. They're 7-point underdogs. They have a projected point total of just 18 implied points. So we're not expecting touchdowns out of Tyrod Taylor. But if you just need somebody to scrape by and get you from this week to the next week, you can typically expect 12 to 16 fantasy points out of Tyrod Taylor with upside to 20 plus if passing volume spikes or if he adds a rushing game score. By the way, Tyrod Taylor, just a reminder, like this dude can hoop. He can ball. In his career, he is averaging 17.5 fantasy points per game in 50 career games where he threw at least 20 passes. Okay. So the sample size is large enough that this isn't a fluke. This guy gets you 17 plus fantasy points per game over 50 contests, 214 plus passing yards. He gets you a little bit over 1 touchdown per game. This is the key here. 34 rushing yards. He has basically a 30% chance of rushing for a touchdown for you. He scored 15 plus fantasy points in 68% of his games, 20 plus fantasy points in 34% of his games. He even scored 25 plus points in 12% of his games with an all-time high of 31.2 back in week 16 of 2016. Now, his matchup against the Buccaneers, it's a good one. I already told you Penix got 24 plus. Stroud got about 15 out of the Buccaneers. Last year's Bucs were a dream matchup for opposing quarterbacks. They hemorrhaged the second most passing yards, 8th most passing touchdowns, 15th most rushing yards, and 5th most rushing touchdowns. Ultimately, the 3rd most fantasy points per game. Nothing is going to feel like you're not going to feel good about it, but if you're looking for just that Band-Aid to get you from this week to the next one, Tyrod is a guy that you can typically plug in and get something out of him. Now, Tanner, I forget what the questions or what the options were. Trevor Lawrence, I remember being one of them. Penix is fine. Like, those guys are fine. They made it into the streamers tab. I got Trevor Lawrence in here. I do got Penix in here, but I have them underneath Tyrod Taylor. And a lot of that has to do with the rushing floor. But ultimately, I have no issues with going with Trevor Lawrence, with Penix, or even Russell Wilson, Geno Smith, Darnold. All of those guys are totally fine. They're all in the list. But if you're looking for your question was a deep sleeper, I mean, Tyrod Taylor is the answer for that one. So, by the way, guys, if you're watching this, you're seeing what you're seeing on the screen with the week winner, and we don't get to your questions, or if you just want access to this for this week, everybody's using it for their start sit questions, DFS lineups, prop betting. They're using this every week. This is just week 3. They're going to be doing it again in week 4, week 5, week 6. This can be yours. You can access this anytime you want. WAP.com/BBFF.
That's correct. That's what I'm doing after the show. Going down my list, get my props in, man. I enjoy it.
There you go. Yep. So hopefully that helps. It doesn't feel good, but it doesn't feel sexy. But Tyrod Taylor is that deep sleeper that can get you something.
I don't mind me some Tyrod here.
Heck yeah.
So. Will, coming back to your question here, he wants to know Tyler Warren, who just got cleared yesterday. He will be expected to play, or Juwan Johnson. He also asked Swift or David Montgomery as well. You already talked about a little bit of DeAndre Swift there.
Yeah.
Morning.
I won't go into the RB one too much. The answer for me is Swift there. The issue with Montgomery is, well, there's a couple things. Well, fine. I will go into it real quick. But it'll be a quick one here. If we want to share our screen, the issue with David Montgomery in week 3, first of all, the Lions are 4.5-point underdogs, as you see here on the week winner. Now, the game itself is a very exciting game for fantasy football purposes. Lions, Ravens, they have a 53.5 over under. That's like crazy high. Usually the high games are like 50 points, and this one's 53.5. Both teams are projected to score more than 24 points. Like this, if you're looking for a game with fantasy football fireworks, this is the one. Okay. So all of that being said, understand it's entirely possible David Montgomery falls into the end zone once, maybe even twice. That's definitely a possibility. There's no denying that. Now, you'll see here that the Ravens are allowing the 5th most PPR points per game to running backs. But there's a catch. Let me dive into that real quick. David Montgomery, okay? Pop open his player note here on the week winner. Scroll down to the matchups, and here's the thing with David Montgomery or matchups with the Ravens. The Ravens are getting torched by running backs right now. They're bleeding the 11th most touches, 2nd most catches. Okay. That's the important part. 16th most rushing yards, 6th most receiving yards, and ultimately the 5th most PPR points per game. Last year's Ravens were among the toughest in all of football, limiting running backs to the 4th fewest PPR points per game. Last year's Ravens would have been a terrific matchup for Jahmyr Gibbs, which is what we're already seeing with this year's Ravens, are giving up plenty of production to running backs in the passing game. Plenty of catches, plenty of receiving yards. That all screams Jahmyr Gibbs. But last year's Ravens would have been a terrible matchup for David Montgomery. They were brutal on ball carriers. They limited running backs to the fewest rushing yards and 7th fewest rushing touchdowns, but they were Swiss cheese in the air. They allowed the 6th most catches, 3rd most receiving yards, 13th most receiving touchdowns. So when you take that and combine it with what we're expecting from the way this game will play out for the Lions, The Lions are 4.5-point underdogs. It's possible they fall behind the Ravens, need to put the ball in the air, can't run the ball quite as much as they want to. This one screams Jahmyr Gibbs over David Montgomery. I'm treating David Montgomery as an RB3 flex. Again, he could fall into the end zone once or twice. That's always going to be within the realm of possibility. But I would rather go with DeAndre Swift. The guy's getting 80% of the Bears' backfield touches. He's a legitimate workhorse in that offense. He's active as a receiver. He has a chance to score a touchdown in his own shootout, his own high-scoring game against the Cowboys. I'm going DeAndre Swift there on the running back one. Tanner, you are good, man. You knew that I forgot the other one, so good work here. All right, Tyler Warren, Juwan Johnson, man. This one, I told you guys at the top of the show that if you're looking for quick hit answers, this isn't going to be the show for you, right? And this is going to be a perfect example of that, because some of these we've been talking about are I feel pretty good about this one, answering it off the top of my head. This one, we got to dive into the process here a little bit, because Juwan Johnson, dude, he's a locked in number one tight end right now. He's a very big part of Kellen Moore's offense. They are focused on getting him the football. But the same is true for Tyler Warren. So let's start with Tyler Warren. Pull him up here on the old week winner. I have him in the green column, which typically means I feel pretty good about having him in my lineup this week. Now, let's dig into what we're looking for out of Tyler Warren. Now, the bottom line, he's a high-end tight end one already after 2 weeks. We should expect a floor of about 8 to 11 PPR points. And the reason for that is elite usage. He's playing 93% of the snaps. He's getting 26% of the Indianapolis Colts targets. So floor, we're looking for about 7 to 9 targets, 4 to 6 catches, 50 to 70 yards, no touchdowns. That's the floor of what we're expecting for Tyler Warren. But when you look at the ceiling, if everything breaks right, if everything goes well, we're looking at about 18 to 22 PPR points. Now, the Colts have a solid team total. They're expected to score about 23.5, 24 points. That's above average. That's pretty good. That's typically an offense that you want exposure to. We're expecting steady volume, right? If we're thinking about the ceiling, 8 to 11 targets is within Tyler Warren's range of outcomes. 6 to 8 catches, 70 to 90 yards, a touchdown. All of those things are within Tyler Warren's range of outcomes. So we're looking at a floor of about 8 to 11 and a ceiling of about 18 to 22. Okay. Tyler Warren is that kind of guy. Now, that game, it's kind of a mediocre game for fantasy football purposes, but on the Colts side of the football, typically it's an offense that you want exposure to this week. They have the 13th highest, so it's about average, but still above average, 13th highest implied point total among all 32 teams that are playing football this week, which suggests a slightly above average amount of scoring opportunities, fantasy football fireworks. Tyler Warren is off to a really great start in his career. He got you 14 plus points on 9 targets in week 1. He got you 11 plus points on 7 targets in week 2. So this dude's got 16 targets over the first 2 weeks. He's playing 93% of the snaps, 26% target share. That is the most important part. That is going to be huge for both his floor and his ceiling. He's an every week number 1 tight end. His matchup against the Titans, in week 1, they held Evan Ingram to 5 PPR points on 4 targets, but it's important to note that Evan Ingram played just 34% of the offensive snaps, so take that with a grain of salt. In week 2, they held Tyler Higbee to 7 PPR points on 4 targets, but it's Tyler Higbee, so take that with a grain of salt. So, and yet, even despite facing no real big competition at tight end this year, the Titans are already allowing the 16th most catches and 14th most PPR points per game to opposing tight ends. But last year, by the way, the Titans were the best in the business when it came to limiting tight ends. They held them to the 4th fewest catches, fewest yards, 8th fewest touchdowns, and fewest PPR points per game. But especially when it comes to tight ends, you have to take last year's defense with a grain of salt. Tight end is by far, when it comes to defense, the one that fluctuates the most year over year. So all in all, we're feeling pretty good about Tyler Warren this week. I'd have a tough time keeping him out of my lineup. Now let's talk about Juwan Johnson. Okay. He is he's been the steal of the waiver wire so far in some ways, at least at tight end. He's a legitimate tight end number one these days. As far as the floor goes, we'd expect 7 to 9 PPR points. Now, the Saints implied point total, it's not good, right? They're expected to only score about 17 points. That caps touchdown odds. Like, you got to understand, if you're starting anybody on the New Orleans Saints, they're only expected to score about 17 points, meaning they're going to have to butter their bread on catches and yards more than anything. So we're really not, you can't bet on a touchdown out of Juwan Johnson or anybody, Chris Olave, Alvin Kamara. We have to hope that they're going to get a lot of catches, a lot of yards. Now, Juwan Johnson, he's playing 96+% of the snaps in both games so far this year. He has a 27% target share. Okay, so this dude has usually been a touchdown or bust streamer, and now he's the type of guy who's getting you a ton of targets every single game. So as far as the floor goes, we're looking at 6 to 8 targets, 4 to 5 catches, 40 to 50 yards, no touchdown. Ceiling is going to be very similar to Tyler Warren. He could push for 18 to 22 PPR points. Seattle is getting spanked by tight ends right now. We'll talk about that in a minute. And this game has a negative game script, a pass-heavy game script for the Saints. We'll talk about that in a minute. But ceiling, we could be looking at 8 to 10 targets for Juwan Johnson, 5 to 7 catches, 60 to 80 yards, and maybe a touchdown. That's the ceiling. That's best case. That's if everything breaks right. Now, again, this game, it's setting up to be an ugly one for the Saints. They're entering this contest as 7.5-point road underdogs. It's a very, now, for the Saints offense, that's obviously not a good thing, but for fantasy football purposes, Saints pass catchers, that can actually work out in their favor, that they are heavy favorites, because if the Saints play this game from behind, if they start to get blown out on the road in Seattle, that could be the sort of scenario. It's negative game script. They start to abandon the run. They have to put the ball in the air. They have no choice. And you got Juwan Johnson, a guy getting 26% of the targets. That's where if Spencer Rattler has to throw the ball 35, 40, 45 times, suddenly Juwan Johnson is creeping up towards 8, 9, 10 targets. Okay. So the game script could actually work out in Juwan Johnson's favor. Now, again, can't expect touchdowns, can't bank on touchdowns. The Saints just aren't going to score too many of them. But Juwan Johnson is balling, clearly. 99% of the snaps in week 1, 15+ points in week 1, 96% of the snaps in week 2, another 15+ points. He has 20 targets in 2 games, 27% of the Saints target share. He's a very, very big part of their offensive game plan. Every week, tight end 1 moving forward. And now we get to the matchup, right? George Kittle put 12+ PPR points on the Seahawks in week 1. And if that wasn't enough, George Kittle got dinged up in that game. He's since been placed on IR. His teammate, Jake, I don't know if it's Jake Tungus, I don't know how to pronounce that one, but he got 10+ PPR points, 3 targets. And then last week, Jonnu Smith and Pat Freiermuth combined for 12+ points on 8 targets against the Seahawks, though neither one of those hit 7 points or 5 targets on their own, but combined, they did plenty of damage. Statistically, the Seahawks are just getting smoked by tight ends. They're hemorrhaging the 2nd most catches, 11th most yards, most touchdowns, and ultimately the 2nd most PPR points per game. Last year's Seahawks were mediocre at best, but again, we're not even going to dig into last year. So when it comes down to it, you're talking about a very, very similar floor, a very, very similar ceiling. And if it were me, if I ultimately had to make this call and it was my lineup, I ultimately would go with Tyler Warren in this one, because the Colts do have a much better implied point total than the New Orleans Saints, theoretically suggesting that Tyler Warren has better touchdown odds, touchdown probability than Juwan Johnson. So if you take a very similar amount of targets and increase the odds of touchdowns, I'm going to go with Tyler Warren. But I do want it to be known, that's a tough call. You know, some of these are like 75-25 or 60-40. This is like 51 to 49% Warren over Juwan Johnson. So hopefully it works out. Hopefully that helps. I'm going Tyler Warren, but I'm not going to fight you if you're going to go Juwan Johnson here.
I like it. Tight end streamers, that's a tough call this year. It really is.
Yep.
We got a guy returning, Clock. Clock, appreciate seeing you again on our stream here. He has a full PPR flex question there between Ridley and Buka and Ricky P.
Ricky P. Love it.
Not pretty
By the
Ricky.
way,
Ricky P.
Yeah, Ricky. I just want to go just one last thing for Will that I just thought of. I almost never recommend carrying 2 tight ends, and I guarantee there's somebody in your league who needs a tight end, especially somebody who had George Kittle, for example. So maybe after this week, see who blows up and then put somebody on the trading block and see what kind of offers you. It can never hurt to put somebody on the trading block. Just see what kind of offers you can get there. All right. Thank you. Full PPR flex, Calvin Ridley, Egbuka, Ricky Pearsall. Calvin Ridley, Egbuka, Ricky Pearsall. This one is going to take a minute. This one is going to be tough. Let me grab a drink of the old caffeine. Let me pull up Calvin Ridley. And in the meantime, let's give a shout out to our sponsors, BS Collectibles in Twin Lakes. These guys are awesome. If you're into sports memorabilia, autographs, jersey signings, helmets, all of those things, you got to check out BS Collectibles.
Are you into sports memorabilia? Then BS Collectibles is your one-stop shop for all things autographed. Whether you're looking to buy retail, stock up wholesale, or dive into the thrill of memorabilia breaks, BS Collectibles has what you need. Check out their retail website, join the live streams, or take a shot with the Fire Factory Mystery Box series and take your collection to the next level. BS Collectibles, whatever it is, we bring the fire.
Love it.
Man, they're so good. They're awesome. All right, here we go. Calvin Ridley. All right, I thought this would be a good place to start because we're just talking about that, excuse me, that Colts Titans game. So let's talk about the flip side of that, right? We're expecting a nice environment for the Colts offense. That's generally an offense you want exposure to, but and at least through 2 weeks, the Titans offense isn't really one that you want exposure to. I'm not sure that changes in week 3. Vegas seems to agree on that. The Titans are entering week 3 with an implied point total of just 20 points. That's the 8th fewest among all 32 teams playing football this week. That suggests scoring opportunities, fantasy football fireworks, those things are going to be limited. So it's kind of like the Saints where you can't feel comfortable betting on a touchdown. You have to pray for catches and yards out of your wide receiver here. They are more of an offense to attack with the Colts defense. I'm using the Colts defense in plenty of leagues. Then they are an offense that you need to squeeze into your lineup. Sean, if you're watching, sorry about your Titans, buddy, but just doesn't seem to be happening. At least not yet. Obviously, Cam Ward's only 2 games in. Now, the 3.5 point spread in this game, that's narrow enough to suggest a mostly balanced offensive approach from both sides. It's not a scary one for Tony Pollard, for example, but it is one that could turn out a little bit pass heavy if this game turns into a little bit, not of a shootout, but if the Titans start to fall behind and they have to start putting the ball in the air just a little bit more. It hasn't been a great start for Calvin Ridley. It just hasn't. He got you 6+ PPR points on 8 targets in week 1, then 8+ points on 6 targets in week 2, but he's only getting about 7 targets per game. And the ultimate hope was with very limited competition for targets, right? It's Alec Aomanor, geriatric Tyler Lockett, Chiga Okonkwo, he's always flashed, but he's never panned out. The hope with Calvin Ridley was that this dude was going to start seeing 10, 11, 12 targets every single game, but he's getting 7. So if you're getting 7 targets in a bad offense that's not going to score a lot of points, the arrow on Calvin Ridley is pointing down. Now, again, there's so much room for growth, right? We know Cam Ward is only 2 games into his career. Typically, there's an opportunity to grow, get better. The coaches take the leashes off a little bit and more pass attempts, all of those things. There's plenty of room for growth, but using the data that we have currently, there's not a lot of reason to have a lot of optimism for Calvin Ridley. Last year, Calvin Ridley scored less than 1 PPR point on 8 targets in week 6 against the Colts, but then in week 16, he scored 16+ on 5 targets. This year, the Colts did a pretty solid job holding Tyreek Hill. They kept him to just 8 PPR points on 6 targets in week 1. They held Jalen Waddle to 7 points on 5 targets in week 1. Now, you can argue that has more to do with the state of the Dolphins offense than it does the Colts defense, but statistically, it's a solid start for the Colts. They did a really nice job on Courtland Sutton in week 2. He scored less than 2 PPR points on 4 targets, but Troy Franklin had a breakout game, right? He got loose in the process. He scored 24 PPR points on 9 targets. Definitely something to be said there for a guy who previously hadn't had that kind of a splash game. Now, all in all, the Colts are currently middle of the pack against wide receivers. They're holding them to the 9th fewest receiving yards, but they're allowing the 14th most catches, 16th most PPR points. Very mediocre, very average. There's nothing that's particularly telling about the matchup against the wide receiver matchup against the Colts. It's not scary. It's not exciting. It's just meh. It's just very average. Now, it's very consistent with last year's Colts. And this is usually where, I mentioned you want to take last year's performance with a grain of salt. Where I do like to add a little bit of stock to that is when it's consistent this year and last year. And this year's Colts so far are consistent with last year's Colts. They were very middle of the pack, 14th fewest catches, but 12th most yards, 14th most touchdowns, 11th most PPR points per game. Very mediocre. So in the end, Calvin Ridley, there's not a lot to feel excited about here, albeit there's not much to feel scared about either. It's not like there's something that's terrifying about this matchup. The only terrifying thing for Calvin Ridley is the current state of the Titans offense. It's not pretty. I'm treating Calvin Ridley like a high-end wide receiver 3. The floor, we're looking at about 6 to 8 PPR points. Again, that's because of the low team total, shaky early efficiency, not a supreme amount of targets. Now, ceiling, we know this guy can get about 18 to 22 PPR points if it gets pass heavy, if his volume spikes up to 9 to 12 targets, if he lands a deep shot. The ceiling is there. We know about Kevin Ridley's ceiling, but I'm treating him like a high-end wide receiver 3. Now, Emeka Egbuka is the next one. Oops. And then I actually forgot about what the third one was. Now, Emeka Egbuka, thank you, Ricky Pearsall. That's one. All right, Emeka Egbuka, I'm treating as a boom or bust wide receiver 3. Now, he does have some added bust potential in this game because it is possible that Egbuka plays this game on a snap count, and that's concerning because his floor is already a little bit unsafe, which we'll talk about in just a minute. Boom or bust wide receiver 3, early touchdown variance. He has a really nice role. He's playing 93% of the snaps. He's getting a 20% target share, which is solid. It's not as supreme as it might expect considering his PPR output to date. But floor wise, we can expect about 10 to 14 PPR points on 5 to 7 targets. The ceiling can get up to 18 plus if he scores another touchdown. We've already seen the ceiling. We know what to expect there. Now, the game, there's some pros and cons to this game for the Buccaneers. Now, it's setting up to be a fantasy-friendly one for Tampa Bay, entering this contest as 7-point home favorites. Now that spread suggests that they are heavy favorites. They should enjoy positive game script. Now the quote-unquote downside to that is if the Buccaneers do run away with this game, if they blow out the Jets, if they get way ahead, the second half could turn a little bit run heavy. They won't need to ask Baker Mayfield to do too much to win this game. He might not have to throw too many passes. That could theoretically lower the volume potential, the target potential for Buccaneers pass catchers. Okay, so that is a possibility, but it's not something that I'm sweating too much because the Buccaneers still have this really nice implied point total, right? They're expected to score 25 plus points. That's the 5th highest among all 32 teams playing football this week. Suggests Tampa Bay is going to offer plenty of opportunities for touchdowns, fantasy football fireworks. Ultimately, it's an offense that you want exposure to, even if passing volume is suppressed. Now, Egbuka got you 12 plus PPR points in both games and 5 catches in both games. Obviously, those things are great. This dude is scoring touchdowns left and right. It's a hot start for the rookie, but there is cause for pause moving forward. He's playing a really solid 93% of the snaps, and he scored 35 plus PPR points in 2 games, but it's important to realize that his success so far has been powered by touchdowns at a rate that's unsustainable long-term. I mean, this dude is literally scoring a touchdown every 2.7 times he catches a pass. Okay, so it takes less than 3 catches for him to score a touchdown right now. That is not a sustainable rate long-term. And he scored 36 plus PPR points over the first 2 games combined, but if you strip away his touchdowns, that number drops to just 18.5 PPR points. Now, touchdowns are the fastest way to score fantasy points. I'm not saying it's a bad thing he's scoring touchdowns. I'm just saying you can't go expecting 1.5 touchdowns per game. It's just not a sustainable rate. But still, he is seeing a healthy 19.7% of the Buccaneers targets. Plenty playable. I'm just treating him more as a boom or bust wide receiver 3 than some sort of sure thing wide receiver 2. Matchup against the Jets, DK Metcalf, less than 13 PPR points in week 1. Calvin Austin did really well, 17 PPR points in week 1. Now, last week, the Jets theoretically held Keon Coleman, Khalil Shakir, and Joshua Palmer to a combined 14.5 PPR points, but Josh Allen himself wasn't asked to do too much for the Bills to win that game. They destroyed the Jets. It's hard to put much stock into that when the Bills didn't have to put the ball in the air too much. Last year's Jets, by the way, they were top 4 against wide receivers. They limited them to the 6th fewest catches, 8th fewest yards, 3rd fewest touchdowns, ultimately 4th fewest PPR points. Tough matchup for wide receivers last year. Sauce Gardner is still there this year. There's nothing so far to suggest that the Jets are going to be a really nice matchup for wide receivers. So ultimately, I'm treating this like a bad matchup for wide receivers for Egbuka. I'm leaning Calvin Ridley over Egbuka just based on the lower target share and the possibility of snap count. Calvin Ridley is going to be like safer, but man, even that doesn't feel right to say considering how bad he's been. Last but not least, Ricky Pears. That is the 49ers. Who are the 49ers? Oh, the Cardinals. All right, so this game, Cardinals, 49ers, it projects as more of a mediocre type of football game, at least for fantasy football purposes. Over-under of about 44.5, which is like smack dab in the middle. That's about as average and mediocre as it gets. And mediocre is not a bad thing. I think mediocre always gets this, like, it sounds like a bad thing, but it's just fine. It's just not exciting and it's not scary. Both teams have implied point totals that land 16th and 22nd among all 32 teams playing football. So both teams are very like, everything about this game so far is like middle of the pack. Even the spread, it's a 3-point spread. That suggests a close game, neutral game script, balanced offensive approach for both sides. Christian McCaffrey might get another 30 plus touches in this game. It's not a game that you want to target, and it's not a game that you want to avoid in fantasy football. Ricky Pears got you 6 to 7 targets in both games. He's playing a very healthy snap share. He's played at least 84% of the snaps in both games, 14 plus points in both of the games. Now his 18% target share, that's a bit boom or bust. That's not enough targets to be considered a safe play. And in his first game with Mac Jones last week, he only had 6 targets, while Juwan Jennings was the guy who went crazy last week, or at least got the majority of Mac Jones looks. His matchup against the Cardinals, the Cardinals held Chris Olave to 12 PPR points in week 1. But again, you could argue that's because of the state of the Saints offense, less about them shutting down Chris Olave. Ted McMillan did really well against the Cardinals last week. 10 targets, 6 catches, 100 yards of dead even, 16 PPR points. And we saw Hunter Renfrow go absolutely crazy last week, scoring dang near 24 PPR points on nine targets with 2 touchdowns. Currently, the Cardinals are allowing the most catches to wide receivers in all of football. There's no defense that's giving up more wide receiver catches than the Cardinals. 13th most yards, 10th most PPR points per game. Last year's Cardinals were up and down against wide receivers, ultimately allowing the 15th fewest PPR points per game. So ultimately, we're treating Ricky Pears like a high-end boomer bust wide receiver 3, steady usage, 18% target share. I'm projecting him for 12 to 16 PPR points, but with upside to 18 to 20 if he can hit on an explosive play, convert a touchdown, okay? Whew, that's a lot. So ultimately, we're looking at a bunch of wide receiver 3s in this decision here. The ceiling is going to belong to Egbuka. If you're looking for a ceiling play, you can, I don't think we need this. If you're looking for a ceiling play clock, I would say it's Egbuka. The Buccaneers are just expected to score a lot more points than the Titans, even more points than the 49ers. But there's no denying he carries the most risk. If he's going to be playing on a snap count, that is very risky. And we just don't know, right? There's always those reports. Sometimes they're true. Sometimes dude comes out and plays 90 plus snaps, but he is going to be the highest risk, highest reward option. So Clock, if you look at your opponent, I don't know if anything happened for you on Thursday Night Football, if you laid any eggs or if you had a nice explosion or if your opponent laid any eggs or had a nice explosion. I would say try and decide if you think you need upside or quote unquote safety out of this decision. If you need upside, it's going to be Egbuka. If you need safety, Egbuka's out of the equation. And then it comes down to Ricky Pears or Calvin Ridley. Now, Juwan Jennings, I did not even mention this. He's entering this game questionable and banged up as well. So whether or not he's limited, it's possible. If he doesn't play, by the way, then the answer is Ricky Pearsall by far. It's not even close. If Juwan Jennings plays, that makes things a little bit tricky. I would say Ricky Pearsall is going to offer you the best combination of floor plus ceiling over both of these guys. Egbuka is going to have the highest ceiling overall, but Ricky Pearsall is going to feel a little bit safer based on the fact that he's not limited in any way. He is getting enough targets to be dangerous. The 49ers should score enough points that he could find the end zone. This one's tough, man. There's no denying it. This isn't like a dead obvious answer here, unless Juwan Jennings is out. If it's me and I'm making this decision for my own lineup, I'm probably going with Jennings. And yeah, I'm probably going with Jennings here, but it's like 51, 49, 49 or what, however, 34, 30.
Wait, Jennings? You mean Ricky?
Ricky, yeah. And hoping that Jennings is out. I don't know.
Yeah,
where's your head at with that one, Tanner? That one's tough.
It is. Mac Jones didn't look too bad, last week. Arizona blew that huge lead they had. They were up by, it was like, 21-7, 24-7, something like that. And allowed Carolina to climb back. Kind of like that, which just saw you explosion with McMillan and Renfro. So,
right.
If I had to throw something out, I mean, I don't mind Ricky. I think Ricky would be the player right now for San Francisco.
I think it's just the combination of floor plus ceiling that you can get out of Ricky Pearsall versus these other options that have been presented. So that's kind of where my head is at on that.
And it's a good thing you brought Egbuka up here, because Derek Devereaux on Facebook was asking about Egbuka, about the snap count, considering playing him on DFS or if he should pivot. So
I would say DF, if there's a place to play Egbuka, it would be DFS, right? Assuming you're playing in tournaments and you're just trying to shoot for the stars, because if he's playing on if there's reports and rumors that he's going to be playing on a snap count, that theoretically is going to suppress his ownership. Like, he might be a lower rostered, lower played player. So if he plays 90% of the snaps and finds the end zone another 2 times, and you're one of the few people that are on him, like, if there's a spot to play Egbuka, that's the one,
Yeah, exactly. And kind of sticking here with San Francisco too, Trone out here. Trone, appreciate you commenting in here. Mac Jones is currently in this lineup, but he's considering Mariota. We're talking about streaming tab again in the backup quarterbacks that are going to be playing. A ton of them are going to be playing in week 3. Yep. It almost feels like the NBA version of mid-season when you have all the starters out injured.
They're just resting, yeah.
And they're just resting guys, right? It's crazy, but what, on your streamers tab here, you already talked about Tyrod, but Jones, Mariota as well.
Yep. I was actually the first thing I was going to mention, Trone. I mentioned it earlier in the show and it feels gross, but if Tyrod is a choice, consider him here. Like, he balled out. I already went into Tyrod Taylor, so I won't spend too much time there, but the guy gets fantasy points. He does. Like, he might not be the best NFL quarterback. He might not be the sexiest option, but he gets fantasy points. So consider Tyrod if he's available. I have to assume he is available. Who else? Let's talk about, where do we want to go from here? So we'll talk about Mac Jones. I was on the week winner tab. I'll just flip right over to the streamers and stashes tab here. Like I said, guys, if you need defenses, kickers, tight ends, quarterbacks, if you need somebody that you can plug and play just for a week, I always have that available for you. Running backs that you want to stash, this is my key to unlocking upside in fantasy football. Before kickoff every week, I go in and I add as many of these guys to my bench as I possibly can, because if anything happens to the guy in front of them, these guys suddenly become RB1s, RB2s, week winners, league winners. These are the guys that everybody's going to be fighting over in the waiver pool if something happens to the guy in front of them. So I want to win that race to the waiver wire before it even begins, for example. Now, quarterbacks. We'll start with Mac Attack, right? Listen, man, any quarterback, any player in, let me zoom in a little bit more. Any player in Kyle Shanahan's offense is always like, you're going to get the most out of him that you can. I think we touched on this in last week's show, Tanner, when we were talking about Spencer Rattler versus Mac Jones. And that was one thing I was talking about, is that, like, say what you want about Mac Jones, but Kyle Shanahan gets production out of his guys. And we saw it last week. Mac Jones was terrific. He played great last week. Let me scroll down here. He 26 of 39 passes, 279 yards, 3 touchdowns. He got dang near 24 fantasy points. Like, Mac Jones just coming in and taking over, clearly MVP of this season. Kidding, of course. But, he entered the season averaging 12.7 fantasy points per game in 48 career games that he threw 20 passes. And then one game with Kyle Shanahan, and dude's getting you about 24. It's wild. Now, the matchup against the Cardinals did a great job against Spencer Rattler, but it's Spencer Rattler, right? 11.5 fantasy points. Bryce Young, on the other hand, just demolished Arizona last week, 23.3 fantasy points. He did need 55 passes to do it, so take that with a grain of salt. We're not expecting to see 55 passes out of Mac Jones, but still, they allowed 328 passing yards, 3 passing touchdowns. Last year's Cardinals were pretty mediocre. It's just a very blah spot for Mac Jones. The game itself, I think we talked about it a little bit already. It's very mediocre, 44.5 over under. The 49ers are expected to score an okay amount of points. It's the 16th most, so it's not scary, but it's not particularly exciting either. There's just not much excitement to Mac Jones. And the thing with Mac Jones is he has to throw touchdowns for it to pay off. If he doesn't throw touchdowns, he's going to bust for you. So you have to look at their implied total, which I think is somewhere around 23 points. I have it written in here somewhere. It's like 23 points. It's just not as strong of an option there. What else did we have, Tanner? There was a bunch. So I'll try and keep it quick on the. Oh, Mariota, man. Mariota is kind of like Tyrod Taylor, that you can say what you want about Mariota, the quarterback, as an NFL option, but the dude gets a decent amount of fantasy points. He's played 68 career games where he's thrown at least 20 passes, and in those games, he's averaged 16.8 fantasy points. That's not nothing, and that's a big enough sample size that you can say, it's a big enough sample size that you can say, all right, this dude is typically a solid bet for 16, 17 fantasy points. And he's played 68 career games of 20-plus pass attempts, meaning if he throws 20-plus pass attempts in this upcoming game, it should be very nice. Okay?
Very nice.
Because it should be very nice. Okay? He scored 15-plus fantasy points in 62% of his games. He scored 20-plus fantasy points in 28% of his games. He's even got you 25-plus fantasy points 13% of the time, including 30-plus in 4 different contests, with an all-time high of 37.9 back in Week 13 of 2015 against the Jacksonville Jaguars. Now, he does have one full-ish game as the Commanders quarterback in Cliff Kingsbury's system. That was Week 7 last year. The Commanders demolished the Panthers. I think that game was 40-7, and that was quarterbacked by Marcus Mariota. He completed 18 of 23 passes. He didn't even throw the ball that much, but still, on such limited volume, he was able to get you 205 yards, 2 touchdowns. He ran for 34 yards. He got you 19.6 fantasy points last year, Week 7, against the Panthers. He destroyed the Panthers. Now, his matchup is against the Raiders. Now, the Raiders were solid against Drake May. They held him under 15 fantasy points, but then they got destroyed by Justin Herbert in Week 2. He got almost 21 fantasy points. Statistically, they're allowing the 13th most fantasy points per game, and that's pretty consistent with last year's Raiders. They limited quarterbacks to the 8th fewest rushing yards, 15th fewest rushing touchdowns, but they otherwise allowed the 15th most passing yards, 5th most passing touchdowns, 12th most fantasy points per game. Once again, very mediocre, very meh matchup. The thing that's a little bit more exciting about Marcus Mariota than Mac Jones here is the environment of this game, theoretically, and this one is going to be more I try not to answer these questions with my gut or personal opinions, but I do just want to throw one thing out there. The over-under is actually lower than Cardinals 49ers. It's a sliver below average. It's very similar to Cardinals 49ers. 16th and 23rd implied point totals. It's a narrow spread. There's just nothing that suggests shootout in this game except Cliff Kingsbury, Washington Commanders, Las Vegas Raiders, Geno Smith. This is one of those games that feels like it has sneaky shootout potential. But again, I'm going to stop. I'm just going to stop right there because that is gut, that is feeling, that is not fact, data, stats, and that's what we're all about here. So that's just me. You can leave it up to yourself to decide if you agree there's some sneaky shootout potential to Commanders Raiders. Let's see. Then we did Mac Jones, Mariota, Russ. I mean, dude, Russ went crazy last week, 30 plus fantasy points. The thing with Russ this week is that he's not playing the Cowboys. That's the thing with Russ this week. The issue with Russ is that the Giants have an implied point total of fewer than 20 points. So that suggests limited touchdown opportunity, limited fantasy football points. You know, in week 1, Russ wasn't that great. He scored 11 fantasy points, 17 of 37 passes. So he completed less than 50% of his passes. Week 2, he balled out, right? So which version of Russ are we going to get? Week 1 or week 2? Week 1, he didn't play the Cowboys. Week 2, he did. His matchup is against the Chiefs. Justin Herbert did really well against the Chiefs in week 1. Sorry, Tanner. 28-ish fantasy points for Justin Herbert. But then Jalen Hurts, take this one with a grain of salt. 11.5 fantasy points, but he wasn't asked to do much at all. He threw the ball 22 times. They were able to just put the ball in Saquon Barkley's belly. Last year's Chiefs were a bit up and down against fantasy or against quarterbacks. Ultimately, they did allow the 7th most fantasy points per game. So Russ is a perfectly fine option, but that low implied total is the scary part for the Giants, is that they're just not expected to score all that many points. Thank you for pulling that up again. You are killing it. Sam Darnold, I've seen as a very popular streaming option this week, and it makes sense, right? Because the Seahawks are expected to score 24 points. Easy win over the Saints. My concern with Sam Darnold is that they're already 7.5 point favorites. That suggests a pretty easy victory at home against New Orleans. Very positive game script. There's no Zach Charbonnet. Theoretically, they're going to be able to put the ball in Kenneth Walker's belly 20 plus times. He should be able to feast against New Orleans. Point is, Sam Darnold just straight up might not be asked to do much. He might throw fewer than 30 passes. That is the concern with Sam Darnold. But there's always some appeal to a quarterback that has such a nice implied point total. The Seahawks are expected to score 25.5 points, which is the 8th highest among all 32 teams. Sam Darnold's been just very meh with the Seahawks. 7 points in week 1, 15 in week 2. You know, he did enter this season averaging 15 fantasy points per game in 63 career games. So he's just everything about Sam Darnold is just meh and mediocre. Last year's Saints, by the way, were pretty tough on quarterbacks. They allowed the 6th most passing yards and 8th most rushing yards, but ultimately they did a really good job of keeping them out of the end zone. 4th fewest passing touchdowns, 7th fewest rushing touchdowns, ultimately the 9th fewest fantasy points per game. It feels like every quarterback that we talk about so far is just meh. Like none of these are particularly strong options. Dude, you're killing it with that. Michael Penix is very much like Sam Darnold in that the Falcons are expected to score a really nice amount of points, 24.5. That's tied for the 8th highest among all the teams. But again, they are 5.5 point favorites. Michael Penix last week, I think I wrote in here somewhere, Michael Penix last week did not have to throw very many passes, so he didn't score a whole heck of a lot of fantasy points because they were able to run away with that game pretty easily. Now, this is interesting, but it should be taken with a massive grain of salt. in one of the 3 games that Michael Penix played last year. It was in week 18 against the Carolina Panthers, and he obliterated Carolina. He completed 21 of 38 passes, 312 yards, 2 touchdowns, 1 interception, 5 rushing yards, 1 rushing touchdown, and he ended the day with 25 fantasy points. Take that with a massive grain of salt, but it is interesting that he got off to such a hot start against this week's opponent, the Carolina Panthers. They've done pretty well against quarterbacks so far this season. They kept Trevor Lawrence under 11. They kept Kyler Murray under 15. All of that should be taken with a pretty overwhelming grain of salt, however, because while they're currently a top 2 defense in football against quarterbacks, they were bottom 2 in defense against quarterbacks last year. They hemorrhaged the 13th most passing yards, the most passing touchdowns, 13th most rushing yards, 7th most rushing touchdowns, 2nd most fantasy points per game. Typically, you don't see a defense go from bottom 2 to top 2 within a span of 1 year. So I'm taking that one. I need to see some consistent performances out of Carolina before I consider them a tough matchup for quarterbacks. The thing with Michael Penix, though, Atlanta should have really nice positive game script. It projects as another one of those games that they can just feed Bijan Robinson. They can even feed Tyler Algier, who had like 15 touches last week. It projects as another game that they can just give the ball to their running backs. Now, if you believe Bryce Young and Carolina can play the way that they did in the second half of last week's game, keep up with Atlanta, that's another game that I think has some pretty sneaky shootout potential. And if that's the case, there's a pretty nice ceiling there for Penix. So you rarely talk about floor and ceiling with quarterbacks, but Penix is one of those guys that's kind of boom or bust this week because the floor is kind of shaky if he's not asked to do much, but the ceiling is actually really nice if Carolina is able to keep up. And then last but not least, we got Carson Wentz. Carson Wentz is probably going to be my last option out of these just because that game is going to be nasty. It's shaping up to be a very low scoring game, over under a 41.5 points, which is tied for the lowest among all 16 games. Both teams are sporting bottom 15 implied point totals under 23 points. Carson Wentz himself has actually been solid. Again, it's another one of those, say what you will about him as a quarterback, but he's played 91 career games where he threw at least 20 passes. And in those games, he got you 17.1 fantasy points, right? That's a big enough sample size that you can say, all right, he's a solid bet for 15 plus fantasy points. He got you 15 plus 63% of the time, 20 plus 36% of the time. And he's even scored 25 plus in 9% of those games with a career high of 31 fantasy points back in 2017. Even if you remove all of his games with the Eagles, right, you could easily say his first few years with the Eagles are where he got most of those points. But even if you remove the games where he wore an Eagles jersey, Wentz is still averaging 16 fantasy points per game in 24 different games with the Colts, Rams, Commanders. So he's solid. Like he knows how to get fantasy points, and his matchup is obviously a good one. Right. The Bengals are allowing the 5th most fantasy points per game, passing yards per game, 6th most passing touchdowns. Last year's Bengals were terrible against quarterbacks. They allowed the 12th most passing yards, 3rd most passing touchdowns, and ultimately the 6th most fantasy points per game. The problem is this game. We're just not expecting much. So, I'm sweating. Now I need to actually answer the question. Man, I mean, it's a bunch of dudes that like you really ultimately can't feel too good about any of these, to be honest. It's the sort of thing that like the floor for Mac Jones is scary because it has to be touchdowns. He's not going to get you any rushing production. Mariota can run the ball. Russ is capable of running the ball, though he doesn't do it as much as he used to. Darnold might not be asked to do too much. Penix might not ask to be do too much. Wentz's game is nasty. The answer here is Tyrod Taylor. If Tyrod Taylor is available, that's the answer. But if I have to pick one of these guys, let me just hop back over here just to look at implied point totals. Commanders are projected for about 23 points. 49ers are projected for 23.5, so about the same. The Giants, that one's not good, 19.2. Darnold is supposed to get more. Penix, man, this one is about as impossible as it gets. I would probably be going Tyrod Taylor to just like get me the 15 points, and hopefully I can. If you need safety and floor, Tyrod Taylor, if he's an option. If you need ceiling, it's probably Penix, just in case that game does shoot out. that would be my answer there. But if I have to keep it contained to just this list, I would go with Penix for ceiling, and I would go with Mariota for floor.
Yeah, I was kind of tossed up between Mariota and Mac Jones there. So that kind of be my two. And that's just because what the Cardinals blew last week. So making Bryce Young look like a quarterback again, you know?
There's tons of validity to that. So if that game shoots out, if the Cardinals keep up, if the Cardinals get ahead, Mac Jones has to throw the ball. Like, there's validity to that. I'd say none of these are standout, like, obvious answers. But if it's me, I would feel the best about having Penix is probably the answer here. Like, when you think about floor plus ceiling, it's probably Penix. Yeah. That would be my answer.
I like it. Guys, you can get all this information as well right down below here in our link as well, wap.com/bbff or basementbrewedff.com, and it'll take you right where you need to be. I mean, it's a great resource. I use it all for my prop bets and my DFS setups on top of my lineups. So, but you get a lot more than that. You get the Discord, you get the draft guide. It's pretty cool. It's pretty cool.
All that being said, Tanner, why don't we give a shout out to our sponsor, Basement Brewed Fantasy Football, and let's just show them. Let's just show them. It's not just the week winner that you get, you guys. It's monthly jersey giveaways. It's Discord access. There's a lot that we're doing. What's up, my fellow fantasy football nerds? If you're looking to dominate your league from start to finish and win cool prizes along the way, it's time to join the Basement Brewed Fantasy Football family. As a member, you're going to get our brand new 2025 Draft Dominator, which is your ultimate guide with tiers, rankings, and season previews for over 280 players to make sure you walk out of your draft with the best team in the league. And that's only the beginning. You're also going to get our 2025 Week Winner, which gives you contextual matchup analysis for every single player in every single game, every single week, so that you can conquer those difficult start-sit dilemmas and dominate your weekly matchups. And let's not forget our amazing Discord community, which is a family of passionate fantasy football players sharing strategy, workshopping dilemmas, and helping each other dominate 24/7, 365. Plus, if that wasn't enough, every single month you're automatically entered into our autographed jersey giveaway. It truly is a no-brainer if you want to take your fantasy game to the next level, have the most fun you've ever had playing this game, and support a small but mighty business along the way. Sign up today for just $69 for an entire year. Seriously. That's 365 days of total domination, community, and giveaways for less than your last bar tab. Join the BBFF family right now using the link that we left for you in the description of this episode. I'll see you inside. Whew. Tanner, dude, you crushed the editing on that promo. I was dancing backstage. That was awesome, man.
That's
you know what?
Yeah.
Let me try something, Tanner. Let me try something. I didn't create any promo code. I don't have anything formal set up. Anybody who's watching right now, I'm going to do let's call it a flash sale. Send me an email, Mikey@basementbrewedff.com. Just put start sit in the subject line or week 3 in the subject, or just BBFF in the subject line. And I will reply to you with a promo code for 50% off a membership to Basement Brewed Fantasy Football. It's only today that I'll do this, but let's see 50% off, half off a membership to Basement Brewed Fantasy Football. Just email me, Mikey@basementbrewedff.com. Why not? Let's just give it away. Why not? There we go.
There you go. Right below, guys.
All right, man. We got about 15 minutes before my son has an event, so I gotta hop off in about 15 minutes. So let me do my best to go rapid fire on some of these.
Okay. Here we go. Hey, by the way, we are live on Twitch. We're live on YouTube. We're live on X and Facebook here. So it's pretty cool here to be around here. And one of the returning guys, Broly, appreciate you coming back in. Start one, Kyron, Jordan Mason, or ETN. And he also has a trade offer. Marvin Harrison Jr. for Keenan Allen.
Wow.
All non-PPR. This is the non-PPR league that we did last week. So,
oh man, Broly's bringing the heat, dude. This one, everything about this is tough.
You brought it last week too, man.
I know. First of all, really great problem to have, Broly. Like the fact that you're going to leave one of Kyron Williams, Jordan Mason, or ETN on the bench that's like wild to me. Like that's crazy. Meanwhile, I'm like, I have a couple leagues where I have to start Kareem Hunt. Like it's ugly for me in some spots, but so you got a good problem to have here. As far as the trade goes, I'm glad you mentioned non-PPR. That makes me lean towards Marvin Harrison because he's like the touchdown guy in Arizona. Like he's not going to be the catches and volumes guy, but he should get you 10 plus touchdowns this year. Now, that being said, Keenan is clearly off to a great start with the Chargers. I would hold tight. I'd sit tight with Marvin Harrison. The best is yet to come with that guy. I mean, the clock is ticking and we're running out of time, but I'd sit still with Marvin even for a little bit. You know what? Let me share my screen here. Let me go ahead and in the Discord community, I'm curious to see what BBFF members think. Give me 1 second. Guys, would you trade Marvin? Oh, hold on. And gals. Would you trade Marvin Harrison for Keenan Allen in a non-PPR league? Curious to see what the community is thinking about that one. And if you ever have these types of questions, anybody who's a BBFF member gets automatic access to the Discord server. You can drop these in there. There's 115 plus. Looks like we got 118 members in there that are constantly bonding over fantasy football, sharing, strategy, workshopping dilemmas, just helping each other dominate. It's an awesome, awesome place to hang out Sunday morning and pretty much every day of the week. Now, the question was, I remember ETN was one of them. So let's start there. Travis Etienne. I know I said rapid fire. Not going to happen. Not with this one. This one's too tough. Travis Etienne is one. Jordan Mason was another. Thank you, Tanner. All right, here we go. Travis Etienne. I feel like this is way zoomed in now. Let me back up a little bit. Sheesh. All right, Texans Jaguars, just kind of a mediocre game. The good thing about the Texans Jaguars is that it's a 1.5 point spread, so we're not expecting anything particularly pass heavy, run heavy. It should be a pretty balanced game. Travis Etienne is off to a pretty good start. He's got 16 to 19 touches, 16 to 19 PPR points in both games. He's playing about 61 to 66% of the snaps. Now, one thing to keep an eye on that makes him a little bit more risky is that Travis Etienne played 66% of the Jaguars backfield, or he handled 66% of the Jaguars backfield touches in week 1, but just be warned, be aware that number dropped to 57% in week 2 because Bashal Tutin siphoned 10 touches for 74 very electric yards and even a touchdown. I even wrote in the week winner that I don't hate the idea of selling high on Travis Etienne. I'm fine with him in week 3. Like he's still obviously a very big part of the Jaguars offense. I just think as the season goes along, Bashal Tutin could continue to narrow that gap on Travis Etienne. It's not impossible that 10 weeks from now, Bashal Tutin is the team's RB1 and not Travis Etienne. That's not impossible. All right. Now, Travis Etienne, he's averaging 13.9 PPR points, 16 plus touches per game in 6 career games against the Texans, but he did score fewer than 9 PPR points in both games with the Texans last year. If you remember, the Texans last year were nails against running backs. They're off to a decent start. They kept Kyron under 14. Bucky got 18 and Rashad White got almost 15. So they're actually not off to a decent start. They're getting beat up a little bit by running backs. They're currently getting smashed, allowing the 9th most rushing yards, 2nd most rushing touchdowns. And again, this is all a huge flip-flop from what we saw from last year's Texans. They were lights out against running backs, 8th fewest rushing yards, 7th fewest rushing touchdowns, 5th fewest catches, 5th fewest receiving yards, 11th fewest receiving touchdowns, and ultimately third fewest PPR points per game. So everything about this sets up is very meh, very mediocre, nothing exciting, nothing particularly terrifying for Travis Etienne. I will tell you, Jordan Mason is somebody that I feel really good about coming into this week because they don't have Aaron Jones, right? Aaron Jones is on IR. Now, I don't love the game, right? We already talked about the Carson Wentz versus Jake Browning Bowl. There's not too much to love about that game, but it does set up well for Jordan Mason to get a ton of volume. Aaron Jones is on IR. That frees up about 10 touches that need to find new homes. Jordan Mason figures to inherit a larger workload, perhaps 15 plus touches per game in the next few weeks. Now, we only have a small sample size to work with, but in 4 games with the 49ers last year, where Jordan Mason handled between 15 and 21 touches, he averaged 12 PPR points per game on 18.3 touches per game. That's actually not very good, by the way. If you're getting 18 touches but only 12 points, that is a red flag from an efficiency standpoint, but ultimately he'll be okay. Volume is what wins fantasy football numbers. Or fantasy football games. For what it's worth, those numbers jump up to 15.7 PPR points and 21 plus touches per game. If you do include the 2 games where Mason handled 26 and 29 touches in weeks 1 and 4 with the 49ers last year, 26 touches is a lot, but it's not out of the question in a game like this. The Vikings don't have Aaron Jones. They don't have their starting quarterback, JJ McCarthy. They probably don't want Carson Wentz trying to win the game on 40 plus attempts. This profiles as a game where like they just want to put the ball in Jordan Mason's belly, try and win the game with their running game, with their rushing attack and with their defense. It's a solid spot for Jordan Mason. Now, ultimately, he is averaging 0.76 PPR points per possibility. That is a BBFF specific metric that I measure to help measure the efficiency of running backs, the efficiency of defenses. We don't have enough time for me to dig into how that metric is created, but just so you know, that number would land him somewhere between 11.4 and 15.2 PPR points if he gets 15 to 20 touches in this game. Okay. Now his matchup with the Bengals, they are currently getting absolutely destroyed by running backs, particularly in the passing game. They're mediocre with rushing yards, but 11th most rushing touchdowns, 5th most catches, 5th most receiving yards, most receiving touchdowns. Ultimately, they're giving up the 2nd most PPR points per game. Last year's Bengals were mediocre at worst. They allowed the 14th most PPR points per game. It's just a really, really good spot for Jordan Mason. So if I'm choosing between Jordan Mason and Travis Etienne to start with, I'm actually going Jordan Mason over Travis Etienne. Now, the last one, this is where it gets really tough, right? Kyren Williams. That's ultimately, that's one of those guys that, like, how do you leave Kyren Williams on your bench? But if there is a week to do it, I got to find him. This is so zoomed in that it's hard to find these guys. If there's a week to leave Kyren Williams on your bench, this is probably the one. The Rams are entering this game with a pretty low implied total, 20.5 points. 9th fewest among all 32 teams. They're underdogs. It's a 3.5 point spread. They're not expected to beat the Eagles, at least according to Vegas. There's at least some risk to the setup of this game for Rams ball carriers. If they fall behind the Eagles, if they fall behind early and need to put the ball in the air, that's the sort of thing that can, abandon the run game, and all of a sudden Puka Nacua and Devontae Adams are racking up 10 plus targets. And that's concerning because Kyren Williams really isn't all that involved in the passing game. He's averaging 2 targets per game. It's just not, he butters his bread off of touchdowns. It hasn't been in the passing game, at least up to this point. And he's off to a pretty disappointing start. He entered the season averaging 18.2 PPR points and 21 touches per game, but he's currently only averaging 12 PPR points on 19 touches per game. That's not great from an efficiency standpoint, but it's only week 2. We have a lot of time for that to turn around. This game just doesn't set up well for Kyren. We talked about the game script and how the game could play out for the Rams, but also the matchup is not necessarily a great one. Now, the Eagles did get smashed by Javonte Williams. They predictably were able to shut down Isaiah Pacheco and Kareem Hunt. That backfield is atrocious. Sorry, Tanner. We can talk about that a whole nother time. Isaiah Pacheco is killing me. But all in all, the Eagles are currently allowing the second most rushing touchdowns to running backs, but they're still holding them to the 15th fewest rushing yards, 5th fewest catches, 2nd fewest receiving yards, 10th fewest PPR points. And by the way, last year's Eagles were the best defense in all of football when it came to shutting down opposing running backs. They held them to the 4th fewest touches, 13th fewest catches, 5th fewest rushing yards, 2nd fewest rushing touchdowns, 8th fewest receiving yards, no receiving touchdowns, and ultimately they held running backs to the fewest. Let me change that. That ain't right. Receiving. Fewest PPR points per game to opposing running backs. If there's a week to sit Kyren Williams, this looks like the one. Now, that, of course, is the kiss of death. That means he's going to score 3 touchdowns. The fact that I said that you would start him, he's going to score 3 touchdowns. That's just the way this whole thing works. If I'm picking one of those 3, though, it just sets up really well for Jordan Mason from a game script standpoint, from a matchup standpoint, from a volume standpoint. He's got the best floor and ceiling of all 3 of these guys. I'm going Jordan Mason. It doesn't feel sexy, right? Because you spent a 3rd round pick on Kyren Williams. But if there's a week to bench Kyren, this is the one. If there's a week to start Jordan Mason, this is the one. So that's what the week winner is all about, by the way. I haven't looked at like projections. If you look at like Yahoo, ESPN, whatever's projections, I bet you Kyren Williams is projected higher just because he's Kyren Williams. But the whole reason I started creating the week winner is because projections and rankings never tell the full story of what to expect from a fantasy player. And that's why a lot of times I'm taking these bold risks in my lineups and benching my 3rd round pick in Kyren Williams to instead use my 9th round pick in Jordan Mason. But that's the way that it sets up this week. I'm going Jordan Mason here.
I don't feel like you can be locked in with where you drafted guys once the season starts. Like you have to just accept some days that you're a 3rd rounder. You might have to stick on the bench one day,
It's insane how many people cling to the draft capital that they spent on guys. Like I can't tell you how many times I've sent out a trade offer that's balanced at worst, and they'll respond with, bro, I spent my 2nd round pick on this guy. And I'm like, yeah, and he's performing like an 11th round, but people cling to that. They think because they spent it, they have to put him in the lineup. But you got to look at the data and the stats and the facts. And right now it's Jordan. It sets up better for Jordan Mason than it does Kyren. Now, of course, Kyren's going to score 4 touchdowns now that I've said all that, but this is how we do it.
I know, right? The kiss of death. I get that all the time. Yep. I understand that.
Oh, sorry, Tanner. I didn't mean to cut you off. Let me do some rapid fire. I won't even touch the week winner. Let's see if I am even capable of this. Good morning, 12 team. It's either good morning or GM. Either I like both of them, but 12 team. Full PPR, 6-point passing touchdown. Roll with Goff or stream Mac Jones. Give me Goff, baby. That game, Detroit versus Baltimore, that game's got a 53.5 point over under. Give me all of the Lions. Give me all of the Ravens for sure.
Tim, we talked about this one here.
Yeah.
Kind of go back and forth here.
Yeah. Listen, Marcus Mariota's, he does have a safer floor because he runs with the ball from time to time. Penix is going to have the higher ceiling. So I would say go with if you just need like 15 points out of a quarterback, Mariota's a pretty good bet to get you that. If you need 25 plus points, Penix is going to offer that opportunity more than Mariota is.
Damian here, Paul,
Damian
or
Dillard.
Sutton.
Brees Hall or Cortland Sutton, full PPR. Who do the Broncos play? Oh, Chargers. That's right. That game has a little bit of shootout potential to it. It's got a 45.5 point over under. Broncos expected, they're on the losing side of the spread. It's only 2.5, so it should be a pretty balanced game. Listen, a lot of people don't recognize that Troy Franklin has a bigger target share currently in the Denver Broncos offense than Cortland Sutton does.
It's wild.
It is wild. It's only 2
You talked about that on the fan. I
did
on the other day.
I did talk about that on the fan. I was on. So for anybody tuned in right now, I recently was invited every Friday at 12:20 Central to go on the Mason Crosby Show, which is a show here in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. But you can tune in from anywhere in the world. I know GQ Greg is tuning in from Colorado, which I appreciate. But yeah, we talked about Troy Franklin and how he's currently his snaps increased big time. He played like 88% of the snaps last week. He currently has a bigger target share than anybody else wearing a Denver Broncos uniform. I'm not saying he's the new wide receiver one. I'm just saying last year, Courtland Sutton was the obvious, like, this dude's getting 10 targets. That's not the case anymore. So there's some risk there. Now, Breece Hall, dude, almost always a running back is going to give you a safer floor because they're quote unquote guaranteed better touches. Like Breece Hall, even if they get blown out, he should get 10 to 13 carries. Breece Hall has historically been a good option in the passing game, but when you have a running back like Tyrod Taylor, a lot of times those guys, instead of dumping it down to the running back, they take off running. So that lowers Breece Hall's receiving ceiling a little bit. I got to tell you, I have Breece Hall in a couple leagues, and I do have him on the bench. It's just the game doesn't set up very well for Breece Hall this week. Possible shootout with the Chargers. I'm probably going Courtland Sutton here. I don't feel great about it. It's like 51-49, but I'm probably going Courtland Sutton here.
All right. And I know we're not going to get to answer every single question here, guys. But again, you can grab the week winner yourself. Let's end off with the trade here from Twitch. Here's Johnny. Full PPR trade question: Etienne and Rome for Chase.
I can't believe I'm about to say, but what I'm going to say. I would want the Odunze side of that trade.
Is that because Joe Burrow's hurt, or what we?
That's thinking? A part of it. That's a part of it. Let me pull up two specific things here, and then we'll wrap this bad boy up. So,
you want me to share?
Sure, can't hurt, right? So Jamar Chase. Okay. Now, there's a little bit of concern here. A little bit of concern. I want to be clear about that. I'm not freaking out about this, but we have data of Jamar Chase playing with Jake Browning. Okay. These two played 6 full contests together back in 2023. In those games, Jamar Chase averaged just 12.2 PPR points per game, 6.5 targets, right? You spend the 1.01 on a wide receiver, you're expecting 20 points per game, 10 plus targets per game. He scored fewer than 10 PPR points in 50% of those games with Jake Browning. Now, and he scored 13 plus points just one time in 6 tries. Now, again, I want to be crystal clear here. You should absolutely take this with a grain of salt. You should, because that was Jake Browning's rookie season. Okay. That's not too bad when you're doing that with a rookie. He showed a really nice connection, really nice rapport with Jake Browning last week, right? He ended up with like 14, 15 catches. Jake Browning threw a ton of passes. Like that connection was there. I'm not saying this is the end of the road for Jamar Chase. I'm just saying there's no way to sugarcoat Joe Burrow going down as a good thing. It's just not a good thing. Now, again, I'm not selling Jamar Chase. I'm not like out there actively trying to trade him. The reason I say I want the Rome Odunze side of that trade is because of Rome Odunze. If you look at what he is currently doing, let me pump this up just a little bit more. This dude, let me scroll down a little bit. Right here. He's playing last week. Scroll up a little bit. Played 94% of the snaps in week 1, 9 targets. 100% of the snaps in week 2, 11 targets. Here is the number that I really like for Rome Odunze. 30% target share. High floor, high ceiling, and an offense that should get better and better and better with Ben Johnson, Caleb Williams. I saw on Twitter the other day that like DJ Moore is suddenly start to pop up in trade rumors. Odunze is a legitimate wide receiver 1 at this point. Like high floor, high ceiling wide receiver 1. I know it's only been 2 games. The 30% target share is very, very convincing. You could argue that he's touchdown reliant, right? 2 touchdowns in week 2, 1 touchdown in week 1. but 9 targets, 11 targets, 6 catches, 7 catches, 128 yards. Even if you strip away those 2 touchdowns from last week, he still got you 19 PPR points. Let me say this. All right, I'm done sharing. I'm fine with holding. I'm fine with either side of this. It's the sort of thing where if you need running back help, ETN is a nice throw-in. I'm not necessarily sold on ETN long-term. I would like to see if there's other running backs that can be fit into this equation. But man, Rome Odunze and Jamar Chase, that gap entering the season was like this, and it's like this now. It's much closer than I think people realize. Again, I'm not trying to sell Jamar Chase, but as far as this trade goes, this package, it's fine. That's a fine package for Jamar Chase. And I hate saying that because I love Jamar Chase more than anybody. And I really don't like the Bears, but you look at the stats, you look at the data. I think it's an okay one. So anyway.
All right, man. We're a little past 9:30. Let's wrap this thing up here, Mikey.
Yes, sir.
I know I'm gonna be back live here in about an hour on the Rec Room Sports Hub. You can find me right here on X as well. I'll be on Facebook. We're gonna go over, me and a couple other guys. We're gonna be talking about sports, or what we like betting wise today, spreads, totals, as well as player props. And we're also, we dropped fancy questions in. I'm not gonna say I'm not gonna help answer, and I know the crew loves it. Like, we're all part of this together, guys. So I'll be back in about an hour here.
Tanner's on camera pretty much all morning. Me, I have to hop out. I have to go to a thing for my son. But yeah, man, I really appreciate everybody tuning in. Like I said, I'm doing this. I'm knocking out this awesome little flash sale that I'm doing. If you want access to the week winner, the Discord server, all of that stuff is included, by the way. We do a monthly jersey giveaway every single month. I give away an autographed jersey to my members just as a way of saying thank you. And it's always something fun, by the way. It's never just me. It's almost never me just picking a name out of a hat and giving it to somebody. It's a fantasy football contest, a World Series contest, an NBA Finals contest, all kinds of fun stuff. So if you want to join the Basement Brewed Fantasy Football family, we want you to join the Basement Brewed Fantasy Football family. I'm going to make it super easy for you. Send me an email, Mikey@basementbrewedff.com. Put whatever you want in the subject line. Week 3, start sit. I love you, Mikey. Whatever it is. And I'm going to send you back a promo code to take 50% off a membership to Basement Brewed Fantasy Football. But I do have to sign out. That's all I got. Tanner, you got anything else, or should I take this thing home?
Let's take it home.
All right, guys. Well, everybody, if you tuned in for the first time, thank you very much for tuning in. Really appreciate you being here. Tanner and I are doing a live start sit show every single weekend. I think we're aiming for 8 a.m. every Sunday. Tanner,
sounds like the spot to be. Okay. Sounds like the spot to be.
All right. I guess I just volunteered you to wake up early every Sunday morning. So every Sunday morning, 8 a.m. Central, right here on the Basement Brewed Fantasy Football YouTube channel. We're also streaming on Facebook, Twitch, Tanner's Twitter account we're streaming from, I believe. So yeah, we're everywhere. If you liked what you saw in today's episode, please tap that subscribe button. It costs you nothing to do so. Turn on notifications so you don't miss anything. Tanner and I are on an absolute mission to get to 1,000 subscribers. We're pretty close to cracking 900, and it costs you nothing to tap that button. So that's all we got for you today. Best of luck to you all in week 3. We will see you on the fantasy football field. Cheers. This brew's for you.